On this episode of Narcissist Apocalypse, we talk with an abuse survivor named Francis. And Francis was in a relationship with a manipulative narcissist. It's a story of enmeshment, fear, jealousy, gaslighting, intimidation, and stalking. Welcome to Narcissist Apocalypse, everyone. I am Brandon Chadwick, and with me today we have Francis. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you today?
I am doing well. Thank you for asking. And if you want to be a guest like Francis is today, please do go to our website at narcissistapocalypse.com. Click on the guest form button at the top of the page. There you can read all of our instructions, and please read them all and either send us an email at narcissistapocalypse@gmail.com or fill out our guest form and press the submit button. And please do send it in the format that we ask for. And we do have a content warning for this episode, as we do discuss sexual coercion in this episode, as well as suicidal ideation, threats, and attempts. And that is your content warning for today. And today you're going to hear Francis's story. And Francis was in a relationship with someone who she could never really trust, from finances to cheating to just everything. And you'll feel quite validated today as she touches upon so many types of abuse that will resonate with you in some sort of way. So a big thank you to Francis for being here with us today. I'm going to get out of my way and your way. Francis, the floor is now yours.
All right. Thank you for that. I guess to start talking about my childhood, I had a pretty good childhood in general, but there were a lot of different factors that I think impacted who I grew up to be and how I have let people treat me in life. We grew up in a military household. My mom was very young when she had me. She was only 17, and my dad was a little bit older. I guess I would call him an alcoholic. And it was pretty volatile in the house. I remember moving around a lot. There were parties where I remember being 3 and him letting me try a cigarette or his beer. And other things that would happen, he would go and empty the bank account when we got paid. So my mom didn't have money for food for us. She didn't have a car and wasn't allowed to work. So that was difficult. And he was abusive to my mom, especially when he was drinking. So I remember a few instances where he would be screaming at her. One night I had come out and he was on top of her on the couch. And I had left my room because I heard them screaming. And I walked over and he kind of stopped and just asked me what I was looking at. At that point, my mom was able to kind of get free. And I remember him taking my baby brother into the room and locking the door, and my mom pounding on the door and hearing a thud because he had dropped my brother, who was only a couple of months old. I'm the only one in the family who's old enough to really remember events like that. When my dad was away in the fields, my mom got her family to come and get us and drive us back home to where they're from. And so I grew up in 2 households, primarily in my mom's home. My mom did have 3 younger siblings, so we're all 2 years apart. So by 23, she had 4 kids. She did remarry, and I didn't see my dad a lot. He did move home briefly and had done recruiting in the military. We, at different points, had restraining orders. He had continued drinking and thrown my stepmom out of the house naked at one point, at gunpoint. And so there were several years where I wouldn't see him. When I did see my dad, there were a lot of gender norms and kind of, I don't know, he would make comments about women belong in the kitchen and those kind of things, even if he was just joking. Is very much boys don't cry. And a lot of pressure to perform, especially for my little brother and his sports and stuff. I remember watching movies at my dad's house, and there'd be nudity or adult content, and he would tell me and my sister to cover our eyes and tell my little brother, who was 3, hey son, today you're going to learn about tits. So it was like this situation where at a very young age, I was being taught that women were really only worth their body and kind of like over-sexualized in a sense. So that was interesting reflecting back on. In my mom's house, it was very different. And my mom was very sweet. She did a lot of things with us, like Girl Scout leader, and took us to sports. She was always a stay-at-home mom. I was never close with my stepdad. He worked a lot, and my mom let him do most of the disciplinary action for us. So if we didn't do things right, I spent a lot of time grounded, even though I didn't really do anything too bad. I never snuck out of the house or drank or did anything, but I always felt like I was walking on eggshells and like I was going to be in trouble. When I was little, I got accused of lying a lot, which was difficult as well. My stepdad was very hard to talk to. He never got close to us because he was afraid of stepping on my dad's toes. So he kind of just lived parallel to us. He would yell a lot and was always right. And we never really built that bond. My mom herself had a lot of trauma, I think, from being with my dad. And she didn't really stick up for us when my stepdad would get aggressive or yell at us. And then she also had a lot of body image issues, I think just from the time, but also she was probably about 110 pounds and when she was with my dad, and he would always tell her that she was fat and that kind of stuff. So when I was growing up, my mom was tiny and she would always be critical of herself and make jokes about herself, like, this is what you have to look forward to, or those kind of things, even though she was beautiful. And I think that caused a lot of issues for me and how I saw my own body. I also really struggled in school growing up. I had difficulty learning how to read, and I was often compared to my younger siblings who did not have the same difficulties as me. My sister, for example, was reading chapter books in first grade when I was reading intro books. And there were a lot of times where we were kind of pinned against each other, and she and my brother would call me stupid or different things. And that kind of became this self-fulfilling prophecy that no matter how hard I tried, I was never good enough or smart enough or those kind of things. And I really struggled all the way throughout high school and didn't end up going to college right away because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't want to waste money, and I didn't feel like I was good enough for college. And I guess, like, kind of on a side note, I grew up next door to my grandmother, and my grandmother was very close and involved, probably too much. She would tell me things like, you're not my kid, but you're my kid, and kind of overstep on stuff. And she was very big on fear tactics. So she would tell me that I couldn't play in the front yard because I was going to be murdered and chopped up into tiny pieces and thrown in a dumpster in a trash bag on the side of the road. So I had this very strained view of the world where there was a lot of emphasis on, I guess, what women's roles were in society. And I was kind of taught that the world is dangerous. And then at the same time, because I did struggle in school, everybody would kind of say that I wasn't that smart, but I was really nice and kind and creative, and a lot of, I guess, pressure on my looks. I would be told I was so beautiful, and I always looked older than I was too. So it kind of gave me this distorted view of myself and my own value and what society expected from me. I guess growing up, I always really cared about other people. I struggled making friends because I didn't know how to talk to people really, but I also felt like I wasn't of value. I really struggled with anxiety and depression, and I got bullied a lot in school. My mom would make comments like, oh, girls are just jealous. They don't want to be your friend because you're pretty, which kind of fed into that. And then because I was bullied and because I felt like I was unheard in my family, like I wasn't allowed to talk about things when I was upset, or things would just get dismissed, and I was constantly being grounded and that kind of stuff, I did end up self-harming in middle school mostly. And in early high school, I had tried to kill myself. And I think that was really because I felt helpless and out of control of my life. And like, I couldn't really express myself or have like support. I also really blamed myself for my parents' separation and felt like I wasn't good enough. And that's why my dad wasn't in my life. I didn't really have a lot of time to process those feelings until farther after high school. I did move out directly after high school and got an apartment by myself. I pushed away a lot of people that probably would have been good for my lives, but because I didn't feel worthy of their affection. And as soon as somebody would tell me that they liked me, I would just kind of push them away. And I really think that looking back on it, I was afraid that they only wanted one thing from me. And I was really depressed after high school. I was drinking a lot and partying when I moved out. So I would drink by myself at my apartment and then sometimes go out to parties and stay up until 2, knowing I had to work at 5. And I was probably at my lowest point at one point. So I guess before this, I did meet somebody and we started dating. And that relationship, I felt like I deserved the way that he treated me. It wasn't a healthy relationship. He had a lot of anger issues and cheated on me a lot and was lying. We were on and off for about 4 to 5 years. And at one of the times when we had broken up, I was waitressing and I ended up leaving that job, and shortly after decided to go back to school for my associate's degree. At that point, I got back together with my ex and I started making changes in my life. A month into my associate's degree, I found out that I was pregnant. And so at that point, I hadn't been sure that this person was the person for me, but we had the same friend group and he was comfortable and I really did care about him and I wanted to make it work. We moved in together and we had a daughter. After a while, he was still cheating on me. I had offered him an open relationship and he told me no, that I was the only person that he wanted. And I came to find out a few months later that he was telling everybody else we were in an open relationship. And so everybody except for myself thought we were in this open relationship, which was pretty devastating because I was trying to be appeasing for him. And I guess the point that broke me in that relationship was that he yelled at me and called me names in front of our daughter. And I guess 3 big things for me from growing up after watching my mom and everything that happened were that everything in a relationship should be even. So I would never allow a man to financially support me. The other non-negotiable things are do not yell at me in front of my children or call me names in front of my children, and do not put hands on me. So when I sat there and had him call me those names in front of our daughter, I knew that I had to separate because I did not want to set that expectation for what a relationship looks like. And she was about a year old at the time. And I told him that I wanted to separate. At this point, we co-parent as friends, and it's a really good situation. We work well as friends. We just weren't good for each other. So I kind of assumed that all co-parenting situations were like that, and I've certainly learned that they're not.
So eventually one day you go to a political rally and you end up meeting the person that this story is about. So what happens from here?
Yeah, so I went to this political rally. I was meeting up with a friend and she was running late. I ended up meeting somebody who I thought was gay. We stayed in contact as friends for several months. And I was actually seeing somebody else at the time. So we were just friends and it seemed really fun and silly. He seemed like a nice person. He seemed intelligent and put together and like he cared about people in the world other than himself. I didn't find him attractive initially. And I think part of where the attraction did come in was that I didn't feel like he was hitting on me. So I ended up getting out of this relationship. My ex, the person that this story is about, lived about an hour and a half from me. And we started hanging out more and going on day trips. And he invited me to stay over his house. I think we made pickles or something from cucumbers in his garden. And he said that I could stay there since it was such a long drive. He'd let me have his bedroom and he would stay on the couch. So I agreed to go down, and it was supposed to be just as friends, but he ended up initiating sex and I really didn't know how I felt about it, but that had happened. And after that, there was a lot of love bombing. He would drive up to my work and bring me flowers or hang out with me for the end of my shift. I was waitressing at the time. He would always make compliments to me about how strong I was or smart or wonderful I was. He told me he admired how great of a mother I was, and he started visiting more and began really pushing boundaries. And I think it's important to note that is probably what I was looking for, because there'd been such an emphasis on things that I wasn't good at growing up and how I looked. I liked getting the compliments on my personality traits. And that really made me feel like he genuinely cared about me and was interested in who I was as a person. And I really needed to hear that I was a good mom and that I was smart and all of that. Also, I will mention I had finished my associate's degree and I got honors in the program. So that was something that had given me a lot of confidence in general, because I went from barely passing high school to finishing with honors in college. So I think that kind of validated those feelings too, of feeling like I was worth something. And yeah, so I guess the first really big red flag was when we were being intimate. I was going over a lot, probably every other weekend, and it did feel like we had a really strong connection and a lot of physical intimacy. But he would make comments that made me uncomfortable when we were intimate sometimes, like, I've never been with a mom before, or I don't know. I can't remember exactly. It makes me feel icky. But I had told him before we hooked up that I was not on birth control and that I couldn't have an abortion, while I support everybody else if that is what's right for their situation. So he knew that. He knew I wasn't on birth control, and I would ask him to wear a condom. And he started kind of giving me pushback on wearing a condom and trying to push those boundaries. And then when he would wear it, he would take it off halfway through. So it kind of gave me mixed messages and mixed feelings, because he didn't want kids at that point, is what he was telling me. And then he wasn't respecting my boundaries. And it almost seemed like he did want kids, because he was taking it off halfway through. So one of the times he had taken it off, he did not pull out all the way, and I had to take a plan B. The week later, he had a road trip planned where he was going to be driving cross country for 3 weeks. And during that time, I didn't talk to him at all. He kind of ghosted me, which was fine because I was really excited for him to be going on this trip and exploring and adventuring. He said he was meeting up with a friend, and I was really excited that he was getting to connect with somebody from his past. On the ride home, he finally called me and we talked, and I told him that I realized I missed him a lot and that I had feelings for him. And he seemed to reciprocate those feelings. So we ended up meeting up, and again, that same thing happened with the condom. And at this point, I felt really conflicted because I couldn't justify using Plan B as my primary birth control. I didn't really have money for it. So I made the decision to risk it and just hope that I wasn't going to get pregnant. So after that happened, he again said that he had a friend coming to visit for a couple of weeks, so he wouldn't be around. So I didn't talk to him during this time. And at some point during the trip where he was gone, I started getting the sense that I was pregnant. And I took a couple of tests and they were negative. And then I saw a post that he had posted, or somebody had posted, of him on Instagram with a girl. And at that point, I realized that his friend was a girl and they were not just friends. So I see this post and my heart just drops because I know in my heart that I'm pregnant, even though I haven't had the test. And 2 days later, I had the positive pregnancy test. So at this point, I think I was really kind of angry. I felt kind of betrayed because I thought we were building this relationship together. And then obviously he had not respected my boundaries. And now I was in this situation where I didn't know whether or not I should even tell him that that was the situation. And so after his visit ended with the girl, he reached out to me and wanted to meet up. He told me he had something to tell me. So I ended up going over to his house and I planned to tell him about the pregnancy. And he kind of just dropped this bombshell on me that, yes, he was dating this other girl and he had feelings for both of us and he was conflicted about it. And then on top of that, he let me know that he was married. So the whole about 8 or 9 months that we'd been friends, he had never mentioned that he was married and going through a divorce. So I really felt like he was living all these different lives. And I was sitting with a stranger, essentially. So I ended up telling him after this bombshell, and I just remember crying. And I was like, I am pregnant and you don't have to do anything. You don't have to be a part of the baby's life. I don't want money from you. I don't want anything. I just want you to know that it exists because I feel like that's the right thing to do. And I don't want to be in the way of your dreams or your other relationship or anything like that. I just don't think I can not tell you. So at that point, he really pushed me to have an abortion, knowing how I felt about it. And I think that was another boundary thing. So we decided to kind of see what happens. I still was uneasy because of all the distrust that I had, but we decided to keep talking and see how it went. And I was agreeable to that because I really was afraid of being a single mom of 2 kids with 2 dads. I just, seeing how people talk about other people in that situation, it wasn't something that I wanted to be in, and I wanted to at least give it a try. And I know that people look down on moms who are in that situation, even though it's not usually 100% on them. So he met my daughter and was really sweet with her. He started doing things with us together. He turned his office into a bedroom. So if we wanted to come down, she had a place to sleep with like a princess bed and canopy and little table and rug. And I don't know, it was just really cute and sweet. And so all these things, it just seemed like he was sorry and wanted to make things work with me. He planned a trip for us to go to Vegas. And I guess another red flag right before the trip, we were leaving. And again, I'm pregnant and I slipped on the stairs and I fell. I just had my back straight and I tried to keep my stomach up in the air. And I ended up having bruises all over my back. And he didn't really seem concerned about that. He just kind of made a joke to me about greasing the stairs and was like, well, you don't need to go to the hospital. We already have this trip paid for. It'll be fine. And just kind of brushed it off. So I felt like I had to go. On the trip, I found out after the fact that while we were there, he was texting the other girl still. Things like, I wish that you were here. I miss coming here with you. I also found out that he takes just about every girlfriend there. That's where he had gotten married. So a lot of repeating trips, which also feels weird to me because it was a new space for me, but obviously not for him. Another thing that I started to pick up on was that he was in a lot of debt. And I didn't realize that, but he blamed it on his wife. He really put a lot of blame on her for their relationship. She had been undocumented and they got married. And she was much younger, probably about 10 years younger than him. And he said that after they got married, she changed and she was always angry and would be very depressed and really just talk poorly about her. Yeah, I think that was one of the first really, really big red flags I saw, just the way he talked about her, and it seemed incredibly vindictive. So I kind of realized at that point that if I didn't make things work with him, it was going to be a really difficult situation. But yeah, that, I guess there was a lot of blame on other people for everything wrong in his life. He couldn't take responsibility. Everything was unfair to him. And I remember when he would ask his parents for money, he would always have some story about why something was unfair or how the world is against him. He, I guess throughout our whole relationship, had issues with money that I wasn't aware of. They would pay off his credit cards, and then it would come tax season and he would ask me to give him money from my tax return because he had over $10,000 in credit card debt that he'd racked up in the last couple of months, and he couldn't tell me what it was for. Or he didn't pay his taxes on his self-employed income, and he would need his parents to cover on that. So he had this just long list of money that he owed to his family. And at one point, he stopped paying his mom for a whole year and didn't tell her about it. And that was really strange that he didn't have that conversation with her. And when she confronted him about it, it felt almost like I was in trouble for the situation, even though I had nothing to do with it. And I felt like it really limited what I could say or do because we owed his parents constantly. I think that was ended up being really hard for me because I was trying to do everything I could. I, again, finished my bachelor's degree. I got high honors in that. I was trying to save for myself and for the kids. And I guess before I got my bachelor's degree, this is when things kind of picked up. COVID had happened, and I had been living with my family, and they didn't feel comfortable with me going back and forth between the houses. And I was trying to see if things would work. So he asked me to move in. And I agreed to. He had told me that I should get rid of all of my stuff because he had stuff at his house, and he, if anything happened between us, wouldn't let me not have stuff. So he would help me with getting things. And he, before that, had asked me to move down there, not with him, but in an apartment by myself. He pointed one out that was next door to his mom's house. And I declined initially because I didn't want to move almost 2 hours from where I was working with no support system and a child and all these things to live in an apartment next to a guy's mom. I just didn't feel right that he would ask that of me. So eventually when COVID happens, I move in, and we didn't actually officially label ourselves in a relationship until after our son was born. During my pregnancy, after I'd moved in, intimacy almost completely stopped, and we would go months without sex. He told me that this was an issue in all of his relationships, and he just didn't have a sex drive. It became like a really huge point of contention and kind of made my self-worth feel really low because at first it wasn't like that at all. And it got to the point where if he were to kiss me, I don't know, it felt like he didn't care in that way. And he told me often that I just need to get over it. And he didn't care that I was feeling unloved or like we were just roommates living together. And that continued through our whole relationship. And I guess like I felt kind of stuck because, again, I didn't want to be a single mom of 2 kids with 2 dads. And I felt like I'd already failed with the relationship with my daughter's father. And I figured it wasn't that bad because most of the time we were friends and we got along and we would do things together. Looking back, the things that we would do, it was always stuff that he was interested in. So he had hobbies and I would get into his hobbies. And then as soon as I got into something, he would be on to the next hobby. And he never had time or energy or desire to do things that I liked or were important to me. Like, I don't know, when we met, I thought he really liked hiking and doing things outdoors, but I think we went on 1, maybe 2 hikes our entire relationship for 5 years. And it was just a little bit confusing because I thought he was one person and he spoke like he was one person, but then never followed through on those things. When we were living in our apartment, our first argument wasn't right away. And it had started because I spoke to him about feeling like the home wasn't mine. I had been living there a while, and it was all his stuff with his ex-wife. And I kind of brought this up and I tried to be delicate about it. And I said, I like your apartment, but it just doesn't feel like it's my space. And he told me that he wanted me to feel like I was at home and I could start like decorating the apartment a little bit as well. And so one day I decided to buy a shower curtain, and I was really excited because I didn't like his shower curtain. And I put it up and I was waiting for him to get home, and he was so angry about it. He ended up storming out and leaving, and I just took the shower curtain down and I put his old one back up. I had to go do something. I don't know if it was dropping my daughter off with her dad or something, but I came home and the shower curtain had been ripped down and all the rings were broken all over the floor, and he blocked me. I couldn't get in touch with him. He just kind of disappeared, and I was worried that he had maybe hurt himself. I was trying to contact his mom, and she hadn't seen him or heard from him. When he had been screaming at me, I just remember in my face, kind of looking down over me. And I think this was another weird thing, because I don't remember exactly what was said or what happened, but he was screaming at me, and I called him an asshole. I remember that. I was very calm, and I was like, I don't like the way that you're talking to me. You're acting like an asshole. And after he had come back, he told me that was the meanest thing anybody had ever said to him in his entire life. And I felt like I had to apologize, which, I mean, I shouldn't have called him that, but it kind of like twisted things around.
So here is an incident where it's a pretty concrete incident that is occurring. There was explosive rage, and he's yelling at you for something that is very small, that you actually took care of. You didn't like it. You put your thing up, but he couldn't still get over whatever had gone in internally within his whole entire system, that you, in his mind, have screwed up somehow, and the world has fallen apart, and everything here is your fault. He's in your face. And on top of this, he has thrown in the wrench of twisting it all around on you, because you're reacting like a normal person. You are, calling him for what he is. And obviously emotions are high at this point. You might regret that, but he's taking that and then reversing it on you as if you're the bad person and that everything that happened before didn't exist. So I'm assuming this is very confusing for you. Like, are you wondering what's true after this? And are you saying to yourself, no, this is what happened. I know this is what happened. And are you going to communicate with people about what had happened to kind of get their point of view?
Yeah, so I did try to communicate with my mom at this point and with his mom, because obviously I was worried about him when he had disappeared. Both of them couldn't believe that he had ripped the shower curtain down. And it wasn't something that was really discussed after. He kind of apologized. He told me he was just mad that I had taken down my shower curtain at that point, which didn't really make sense because he was mad in the first place that I had taken down his shower curtain. And it kind of got brushed over. It was a red flag, and it was something that made me feel uncomfortable. But I did also question whether or not maybe I did just mess up. Maybe I needed to ask him. And I think that set the stage for our whole relationship, because I really had to ask him for everything. He was very minimalist, and he expected everything a certain way. And I constantly felt like I wasn't doing enough to live up to his expectations. And this was kind of just the start of that. Yeah.
So you said his mom was shocked or didn't expect that. Is that true? What was his life like at home before?
Yeah, so he grew up without his dad. His dad had left him for another family when he was 4. So it was just him and his mom and his maternal grandparents. They ended up moving here when he was 10. His mom had remarried. He ended up having a younger sibling at that point and didn't speak any English, came to school and had to learn English at 10. His mom left their home country without even telling the dad that they were leaving, and just kind of made the decision to bring them here. So he's very close to his mom. She's very involved. When we first got together, she was coming over and refolding my laundry in my drawers, including my underwear, when we weren't home, which was really uncomfortable for me. And I remember having conversations with him about how it made me uncomfortable. And that was one time where he did stick up or kind of side with me, which didn't really happen very often. He kind of brushed it off. Well, it's been just me living here and she's helping me. And she always does that because she's a good mom and she loves me. So I, in a way, understood that, but it just felt kind of weird that a man in his 30s would have his mom coming over and folding his laundry and cleaning out his fridge and different things without asking. There were a lot of weird situations where I remember my son was about a month old. I just had him and we were over there and he looked across the table at his mom. We were all sitting out by the pool and he asked his mom what she thought we should do about his nap, like when we should put him down for the nap. And I just remember being shocked because his mom is the grandmother, obviously. I'm the mother of the child, and we're sitting next to each other, and you look to your mom to ask about when you should put your son down for a nap. And it just felt strange to me. And I remember feeling kind of hurt about it as well. But instances like that would happen all the time throughout our relationship. There would be times where, for example, I got a car seat for her car because she was babysitting sometimes. And she decided that she didn't think he should be rear facing. And so she went out on Facebook Marketplace and got a used car seat and had him forward facing, even though he was too young to be forward facing. And I would be told, well, she does a lot for us. She's just driving around town. It's fine. It's not a big deal. And I wouldn't be allowed to say anything. And I would just tell him, like, if something happens to him, even if it's around town, you'll regret that you didn't say anything to her. But he wouldn't let me. And so a lot of weird red flags like that, where, I don't know, he was always looking for his mom's approval, kind of, and probably not getting it enough. Yeah.
So also, when we're talking about family, you eventually did find inappropriate messages that he was sending to his 17-year-old step cousin. So what happens from here?
Yeah. So I had my sister over and I didn't see her very often. And I'd taken a couple of pictures. My phone, I think, was in the bedroom charging. So I took a couple of pictures of her and the kids on his phone. At this point, neither of us had passwords on our phone. And I don't really believe in going through people's phones. It's not something I was ever inclined to do. But I went to go send myself a message with the photos. And I found messages to his 17-year-old step cousin. I didn't know who it was. I'd never heard the name before. And I was just curious because it was a girl's name. And I opened it and I saw half of it was in English, half of it was not. And I could tell that it was flirtatious. Like, I wish you were here on the couch next to me, as a rough translation, with love hearts, and I'll get on a plane to you right away and come and cuddle you, and different things I don't remember the exact messages, but enough where it felt icky. I had gone and like screenshotted a couple of them just to send to myself. And I deleted the screenshots. And when I confronted him about it, he told me that I was being ridiculous. It's his cousin. They're like siblings. She's like a little sister. That's how they talk. He did nothing wrong. And it was my own fault for looking at his phone. And if you look through somebody's phone, you're always going to find something you don't want to see. And that I needed to essentially get over it right away. And if I didn't get over it, that we didn't have a relationship and we would need to break up right then. So I didn't really have time to process the whole situation or understand how I felt about it because I was forced to just get over it in that moment or break up. And it was like, I remember him being so pushy about it. Like, you either trust me or you don't. And this is the way it is. And if you don't, then you need to leave kind of conversation. So that was really overwhelming. And I didn't really have time to process it. He, at that point, put a password on his phone because he didn't trust me because I had seen the messages and never really admitted to doing anything wrong. At the same time, my ex had really pushed me away from my family. He had told me, you can't talk to your family about things because they're going to hate me. My stepdad said something 50 years ago and my grandmother has never forgiven him. And your mom is just grudgy and she's never going to forgive me for stuff. So I really was isolated where I felt like I couldn't talk to my own supports. I'd moved pretty far away and I didn't know anybody. Again, we were in COVID and I had no support system. So I did try to build that support with his mom. And I did talk to her also about our intimacy stuff. And I told her that like I had not felt like he wanted to be with me for a while and that we hadn't been intimate. And I said that I had mentioned maybe him getting a vasectomy. And she looked at me and said, I don't think he should do that because he might want kids with his next girlfriend. And then she said, you should just take your temperature to make sure you're not fertile. And then maybe he'll want to be intimate with you. So it was just like very strange and weird, that reaction. His mom, a lot of the time it would get blamed on translation. But I don't think that it was mistranslation. One time she told my mom, oh, it must be really hard that you don't get to see your granddaughter anymore since they were living with you before. And my mom said, yeah, we miss her a lot. It's hard when she lives so far away now. And his mom said, well, you just have to put in more effort, even though we had moved down 5 minutes from her house. And she was telling my mom that she just needed to put in more effort. So just a lot of weird kind of snide comments that I had to kind of blow off as unintentional or just a translation issue. But I think we're very intentional.
So we're dealing with someone who's enmeshed with his mom. He's isolated you. Intimidation and rage is showing. He needs bailouts. Yet he's always playing the victim. Another thing you told me off the call was that he's also constantly stating you aren't the victim, that you are the victim of your own consequences, which is gaslighting you even further. You also told me that intimacy was on his terms and conditions. So when he did want to have intimacy, which was very infrequent, it would feel coerced. And then as time went on, you eventually got an STD from him, and he didn't tell you about this before. He then minimizes your feelings about it, and you're not feeling good. And now you're feeling stuck and feeling just generally bad about yourself. So that has happened in between here, and kind of getting back to your family. The way he's treating your son starts to become an issue as well. So tell us about how he's relating to your children and his parenting.
Yeah. So he did not have a lot of patience for the children. Our son, I didn't know at the time, had like enlarged tonsils and adenoids. So he was waking up pretty regularly at night as a small baby. And it was because he wasn't getting enough oxygen. So he would do these really loud screams. And my ex would just complain about how awful of a baby he was and how unlucky we got. And all he does is cry and he won't sleep and he's punishing me. He used to say that all the time. He would make comments about how my daughter doesn't listen and call them stupid fuck faces and things like that. I remember getting texts while I was at work where he was like, I'm just not going to take care of him. And it would scare me and put me in this place where I'm at work and I have to make money so that I can pay my bills, like our bills. And I don't know if my kid's safe at home. And I would ask him to take him to his mom's house and try to make sure that he wasn't harming him, because the messages he was sending me were pretty manic. And there were many times, most of the time, the whole relationship while our son was alive, he would, during his parenting time, so when I was working, take our son and just drop him off at his mom's house. He would say, oh, he sleeps better there, or, oh, my mom's going to watch him and then I can do whatever it is that I want to do. And he would oftentimes just not work during the day. And then as soon as I got home, would be like, I need to work, so you have to take care of the kids. And had no real excuse as to why he hadn't done his work during the day, because his mom was watching her son. And it really felt like a way to just get out of parenting. I would get the kids ready for school, bring them to daycare. I would pack lunches. I would work all day and come back and have to get everybody ready for bed, get dinner made, just kind of living this routine. And he would complain that the house wasn't up to his standards, or it was a mess. And I literally felt like all I was doing was cooking and cleaning and caring for other people. And I guess before that, he would go in when my son was a baby and he would be crying and he would squeeze him and hold him to his chest and just like shake him up and down and blow in his face like a sound, but it was loud, like the least calming thing ever. I could hear him in the other room. So I'd constantly have to intervene, and he would just throw a tantrum and yell about how unfair it was and the kids were awful. So we ended up having our son's adenoids out. He wouldn't go to most of the doctor's appointments because he was afraid of needles. So that was put on me as well. I would be the one to miss work, to pay for them, everything else. There was a time where my daughter had gotten up for school late and wasn't listening. So he picked her up naked and took her outside to the car and told her he was going to bring her to school like that. She kicked the car door and was screaming, and he ended up like slapping her butt really hard, which I just remember feeling so helpless. And I told him that he was never to do that again. And he never did a physical discipline like that on my daughter again. But I know that it caused issues for her. She had shared it with some of my family, and they didn't bring that up to me until after we separated. But as my son got older, he would do things like squeeze his cheeks or his arms and kind of like grab both of his wrists and hold him down when he wasn't listening. There was a time where we were on vacation and he slapped him in the head so hard that I thought he was going to get a concussion. And I didn't yell. I don't yell in relationships, but the only times I have ever yelled were when he was being rough with our son. And I would just put my foot down and be like, do not ever do that again. Like, I'm pretty sure you just gave him a concussion. Sorry. So I felt kind of stuck because I saw the way that he was reacting and the lack of patience. And I didn't want to leave my son who couldn't talk with this person. And what else would happen? He would yell at him, like, put your shoes on now, put your shoes on now. Do you understand me? And my son will mimic things like that. If he's upset at me at this point, he'll yell at me and say, do you understand me? So I'm trying to kind of combat that through all the separation. But I think that's been pretty traumatic for everybody, including my daughter who's watched it. There were other inappropriate instances where my daughter was about 7 and sometimes she would go over to go swimming, and I would always send bathing suits, and I would come over and find her completely naked in the pool on my ex's stepfather, and he'd be swimming around with her, like sliding around on his back. And that made me really uncomfortable as well. And I would say something about it, and he would tell me that I was just being prude. Americans are so prude. There's nothing wrong with that. She's just a kid. You're sexualizing it, and make me feel like I was crazy or bad. And I would try to like set these boundaries, like, that's not okay. That's my daughter. And I don't feel comfortable with it. I sent a bathing suit. She needs to be wearing a bathing suit. And it happened several times where I'd come over. She hasn't obviously told me that anything happened to her, but it's kind of been a concern of mine looking back on everything. But anytime I had an issue with anything, it was, well, they do a lot for us and you're being prude, or just kind of minimizing things that made me uncomfortable.
So you already talked about isolation, but can you elaborate a little bit more on it?
So he had already isolated me from my friends and family. He would say that he didn't think my friends were good friends or that they cared about me the way that he cared about me. He made comments about my family hating him and would say that he didn't feel comfortable around them. So he wouldn't go to see them with me when I asked. I had told him, you're never going to build a relationship with them if you don't ever come around. They're never going to get to know you. But he was so convinced that they hated him and he didn't feel comfortable going. So I really didn't have anybody. And then at the same time, he would get upset when I did go to visit my friends or family because I was taking time away from him and time that we had together. And on top of that, he would make comments whenever I did anything about how he enabled my doing that. He would make comments like, you got to do that on my back, or you only got to do this because I enabled it. And I would feel really guilty about anything I did. And I remember when we first got together, I told him that when I finished my bachelor's degree, I really wanted to go on a girls' trip to celebrate. And I had ended up graduating college on my 30th birthday and talked to him about the trip, which he was in support of. It was such a huge accomplishment for me. Again, I got a almost perfect grade. So I was really proud as a mom of 2 kids, working and going to school and studying at night and writing papers at night and proving to myself again that I could accomplish anything I set my mind to. I wanted to go and celebrate. And he was in support of this. But as soon as I booked things on the trip, that really changed. He was almost nasty to me and kind of held it over my head for the majority of our relationship. He didn't call me at all on the trip. Even, I guess my daughter fell into the pool and was able to get herself out and came into the house soaking wet and crying. And he didn't call me because he didn't want to worry me. So I only found out when I had called that night. And the whole trip, he would say, you only got to do this because on my back or my mom's back, we helped you with the kids so that you could do that. But when he wanted to do things, I never would have said anything like that. I was always very supportive of him going on trips. He would go on camping trips every year with his friend, or he would go to Europe or different places. And I was always very supportive of that. So it just felt confusing and contradictory and kind of built a little bit of resentment in me, because in my head, I knew I wasn't doing anything wrong, but he really made me feel like I was an inconvenience and I wasn't worth celebrating. I guess kind of flowing off of that, he would always make me question myself. He would act like we didn't have conversations and kind of gaslight me and say really mean things. I can think of one example where I had been sick with COVID and I was working all day and taking care of kids and cleaning. And I told him this because he was telling me that the house was a mess and I hadn't done enough. And I kind of broke down crying and I was like, I've been doing all these things all day and I'm sick. And like, I have been cleaning all day. And he just looked at me and kind of smirked and was like, you say you've been cleaning all day. I just have one question. Whose house? And he would just make little jabs like that at me. And constantly, I just felt like I was walking on eggshells. And again, nothing was ever good enough. When he would get really upset, he would let on to me that he was going to hurt himself. He would disappear and again, block my number or calls. There was one time where he had disappeared onto the roof. And I had to beg him when I found him to come back and to talk to me, but I thought he was going to hurt himself. It got to the point where I don't know, if I wanted to go somewhere, he would always say that he didn't trust me to make good purchases, or I would spend too much money, even though I didn't, and I would spend my own money on things like groceries. So he would always insist on going to the store with me to monitor what I was purchasing.
So at this point, with everything that has happened so far, it sounds like you are now, because of all of the manipulation tactics that have taken hold, that you are going to be questioning everything about everything that you do. That no matter what it is, you might have grief about, I'm going to do this, well, he might react this way. You're living within the prison or in the confines of all of these things to try and be this thing. Are you feeling at this point that it's you, or are you knowing that it's him, and are you thinking to yourself, I need to leave this situation at any point? Or are you still in the mind frame of like, I have 2 kids, 2 dads. How am I supposed to get out of this thing? You haven't finished your degree yet. You know, you're feeling trapped, but knowing you have to leave?
I think before I finished my degree, I was still kind of like, I knew things weren't amazing, but I was just kind of willing to sit it out until my son turned 18. And I figured, hey, this person doesn't love me. I kind of had this feeling that if I were to die, he wouldn't care, which was a horrible thing to think about. But I just felt like we're friends. We live together. It's fine. I'll get through this. I think I noticed some things, but at the same time, I don't think I noticed the extent of the manipulation that was going on. The first time I remember realizing it was kind of towards the middle to end of our relationship. There was one time his mom had asked me about something, about doing something, and I paused and I just looked over at my ex, like waiting for him to tell me if it was okay. And I didn't realize I was doing it consciously, but his mom made a comment, "What do you need his permission?" and laughed. And I just, at that moment, like, it hit me what was happening, that I couldn't make decisions for myself. I was just being told what to do, when to do it, and it would be a problem if I did things on my own. On the same, I guess, in the same breath, he would go and do whatever he wanted. He would just disappear, and he knew that I would take care of the kids or different things. We'd be home, and then his car would be gone. I had no idea where he was. So that was strange, because if I were to do that, it would have been a massive blow up. And he started, he would gift me things, which I feel really guilty when people give me gifts. I don't like it. Ever since I was a kid, I always felt guilty if people gifted me stuff, but he would say that's his love language. And he would gift me things that I didn't want or didn't need, like an iPad or an Apple Watch or different things like that. Usually, I think, after something had happened. And he started giving, sharing data, I guess, that I didn't know about. He would get me, "Oh, here's a fob for your keys so that if you lose them, you'll know where they are. Or here's one for your wallet," tracking devices. And I am not tech savvy. I had never had anything like that. And he set it up on his phone too, to be able to help, but I didn't know that he was doing this. So it was I really, looking back on it, because I didn't know he was tracking me, there were gifts that he was also using to control me and make me kind of reliant on him in a way. And he also knew it made me uncomfortable, and he just said I had to accept it because that's his love language.
So you brought up the tracking of your location through these devices, and you ended up making a friend when you did get a job. You made a friend at work, and he became jealous of that person. And at one point, because of the tracking devices, your ex saw that you stopped on the way to get your daughter to see this person, to hang out with them. And he was a jealous person and didn't like that. So what happens from here?
Yeah. My friend was the first person that I met down there who had a lot in common with me. And I had a lot of fun talking to him and hanging out at work. And we kind of went through that whole onboarding process together, and we had a group of friends. So at the same time, this friend's mom was passing away. She had cancer. So I did stop over one day because I wasn't allowed to talk to him. He just was going through a really hard time. And I swung by on my way to get my daughter. And I didn't realize I was being tracked. So I grabbed my daughter and drove home, got the kids to bed. And at this point, he kind of went off. This was the biggest explosion that he had had since everything happened. And I remember, again, screaming in my face so much that spit was hitting me, telling me I cheated on him, telling me that I betrayed him. This is the worst betrayal that he's ever experienced. And he went out to my car to try and get my SD card to listen to my conversation with my mom from my camera. He told me that I destroyed our family. He threatened to show up at my work after this. He's told me to stay vigilant because he can come at any point. He would send me messages saying that he was driving by my friend's house. He told me I wasn't allowed to have a lock on my phone anymore, and had threatened to hurt my friend with a knife. He threatened to get a gun, and he threatened to curb stomp my friend. And so there was one instance, a few days after everything, where he had said that about curb stomping him. And I got a message saying, "I'm sorry about your pots." And I was like, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Just practicing curb stomping." And I wouldn't have looked on our video camera had he not said that. But it's honestly one of the scariest videos I've ever seen. He's just so enraged, and he stomped my flower pots with my raspberries, big planters, just completely torn apart. And the amount of anger in it was so insane. So he really was just trying to put fear in me. There would be times where he'd walk in and smack the camera at our door and like stare into the camera at me. He would take pictures of me if I left. Our house had a lot of recording devices, and I felt like I was constantly being watched. My phone was on his family phone plan, so he pulled my call logs. He was monitoring everything I did. If I left the house, he'd take pictures of me and ask me where I was going. And the only place that I could talk to people, I would have to go for walks so that I knew that I wasn't being listened to. And I would download and delete Snapchat because I knew that it was something where I could delete the messages. And I had 2 friends I talked to on there. Well, 3 friends I talked to on there about what was going on. 2 friends from work, including this friend that he was upset about, and then my best friend since I was 8. So that was the only communication I really had with anybody. At this point, I had asked my ex to go to counseling with me before for intimacy stuff, and he told me no, because it would just pin us against each other. But he agreed to go to counseling. He actually mentioned going to counseling after this and said that he was willing to now because he wanted somebody else to tell me how I had fucked up. And I was apologetic. I said, I understand how that would look that way, and I should have just been honest with you, and I'm sorry for lying, but I didn't do anything wrong, and this is just my friend. And I feel like you've been overreacting, and I feel like you're isolating me. And I explained again that my friend's mom was dying, and I was trying to be a supportive friend, but he wouldn't listen to any of it. It was just about how I had messed up and I betrayed him. And throughout counseling, it was all just focused on that. The one time we talked about anything else, he almost wouldn't go back. So it really just was talking in circles and kind of a waste of time and money, in my opinion. But it kind of bought time where things were not as bad for a while. So that had all happened in October of 2023. In February of 2023, I went to go visit my mom, who is living in a different state, and he refused to go. And he said that I should just go and spend time with my family. They didn't want to spend time with him anyway. So I took the kids by myself. It was 2 plane trips to get there. At this point, I think it was the moment where I really realized how bad things were and felt like I was ready to get out. I just didn't know how. And I had some real heart-to-hearts with my family. And it was the first time I really felt like I had a deep conversation with my stepdad, which was really nice. And he said that he was really supportive of me and I could stay in their house back home, and that he didn't feel like this person was safe for me or that they loved me or respected me. So that was really nice to hear, just that I guess, validation from my stepdad. While I was there, I didn't talk to my ex. I called a few times to let him talk to the kids, but he didn't call me a single time. When I came back, I just kind of kept going with the motions, and we continued counseling for a little bit. And I was trying to plan how I was going to get out, but I felt like I needed like a reason. And that kind of happened in June of 2024 when he left devices open, and curiosity got the better of me because there were other things that made me think he might be cheating on me that I won't get into. But I found a message to his ex, the one that he was seeing at the same time as me at the beginning, confessing his love for her, saying that he missed her every day and leaving her was the biggest mistake of his life. And in that moment, I didn't really feel anything negative. It just kind of felt like a clarifying moment that I wasn't crazy. And it just made sense. And I felt relief. So that night I talked to him about it, and he said that it was a moment of weakness. He didn't mean it. And I said that I wanted to separate and that I wanted him to be happy and that he should reach out to her again. We had this kind of calm conversation, and then I went to go to bed. And at this point, he told me that it was his turn to go through my phone. He had figured out my password weeks ago, and that one of his arms were stronger than two of mine. And then he made me sit there with him, and he went through my entire phone using my face to unlock like my deleted photos or notes or different things, and just went through everything in my phone and would not be satisfied. He went through all my messages. He was very manic, and it was scary. He ended up holding my phone until 4 a.m. And at a certain point, he kept saying that, I know you're cheating on me. I just have to find proof. And he was crying and telling me how awful I was and how I destroyed our family and I'm the worst person he's ever met. He fell onto his knees and was begging me to marry him. And then like just kept switching emotions. And at one point he grabbed like the largest knife from the butcher block that we had. And he walked towards me and just stood there holding this knife up and staring at me. And his eyes were black. Like I had never seen anything like it. And in that moment, inside, I think I was panicking because I know statistically a lot of domestic violence related deaths happen in kitchens and bathrooms. That's something that my mom had told me when I was younger, and it's just always stuck with me. And here he was standing over me with no emotion on his face and these giant black eyes. And he's so angry and he's holding this knife. And I didn't know if he was going to hurt me or hurt himself. And either way, I didn't want him to. And I don't have my phone, so I can't even call for help. So I just told him over and over and over again. I, in a very calm voice, put the knife down. Put the knife down. I don't know how many times I said it or how long he was holding it for. It just was kind of a blur. And eventually he like kind of blinked and then walked over and set the knife on the stove. And I was able to run over and grab that knife in the butcher block. And I brought them and hid them behind the island while I tried to de-escalate further. He kept switching from these states again. I wanted to marry you, even though our whole relationship, he had said, I never want to get married to you. How could you do this to me? He cried that he wanted his mommy. It was just very volatile and uneasy. The next couple of days are honestly a blur. I didn't call the cops that night when I got my phone back. I just kind of went to bed. I was sleeping in my son's room every night. I lost weight drastically. I wasn't really sleeping at all. I was having nightmares, and I thought maybe if I slept in my son's bed, he wouldn't hurt me because my son was there. He would corner me places and like make me talk to him when I didn't want to, or like when I don't know, he was just so manic about things. I didn't think it was healthy for us to be talking when he was in that state, but he would push me to, no, you need to talk to me now. You need to decide this now. And he wouldn't let me leave conversations. He had blocked me from seeing my son one night, and I was so scared because he never wanted to sleep with our kids, with our son specifically. And I had come home, and he had been sending me texts nonstop to the point where I had to threaten to block his number because he was calling me mean names and stuff. And he had my son in the room, and I wanted to say goodnight. And I was afraid because my son, if he wasn't sleeping in the bed with me, I knew I was going to be alone in that room. And he blocked me in the room so I couldn't leave. And I told him I felt unsafe. And I just remember he got up, came over to the bed, and I said, it makes me uncomfortable, especially after you pulled that knife on me. And he looked at me and he said, I didn't do that, and just smirked at me. And then he's kind of went down this like rabbit hole of, well, you make me feel unsafe. You told me you were going to take our son, and I felt unsafe when you said that. And like just kind of started spewing all this stuff. And at that point I was like, I can't do this. I'm sorry. Good night. And I like left the bedroom. And so it was a lot of that for a few days. I didn't know what version of him I was going to be getting in any moment. And a few days later, I ended up getting a notification. I'd logged into work, but I got a notification on my phone that somebody had accessed my Apple ID. And when I went out, he was on a computer that he had given me for personal use and schoolwork, and had logged into my Apple ID on there. I don't even know how he knew my password because I wasn't logged in on it. And I asked him if I could get on and delete my account. And I said, all my banking information is on there. I just want to make sure that I can delete that. You don't have permission to go through my stuff. Can I just upload my documents and delete it? And he said, no, I'm not done with it yet. Maybe when I'm finished, I'll let you. And he took the laptop and put it in his backpack. And he had gone to the bathroom to brush my son's teeth. And I grabbed the laptop. And at that point, he followed me and was screaming at me. He's recording me. And my son's there. And I was so scared. I just remember everything felt blurry around me, and I felt kind of numb. And I was begging him, please just let me delete my stuff. I don't want you going through everything on my computer. And he was screaming and had taken me by the laptop. He's tried to squeeze my arm to pull my arms off of the computer, but he took the laptop and picked me up by it and slammed me up and down off of the ground, and eventually decided that he was going to let me do it. I think he said 30 seconds he's like, I will time you. You have 30 seconds to delete your account. And I was crying because I couldn't figure out how to do it. And he kind of was like, whatever, you just keep it. And I'm taking our son to school. And he left. And I had bruises on my arm from where he had squeezed me. And yeah, I don't know. It was incredibly traumatic. I had to call out of work. I remember I called my dad, and I'm not super close with my dad, but he's a cop. And I don't think he's ever heard me cry like that. And I was up in my room, and I was just asking for advice because I didn't know what to do. I told him the situation, and he told me that I should just try and make it work. But at a point in the conversation, which again wasn't really a conversation because I was sobbing, I was absolutely devastated and scared at this point. And my ex came home, and he came upstairs and was very calm. And, hey, I'm so sorry that happened. You know, I'd never hurt you. Just like minimizing what would happen and following me. And I told him, I need space from you. I can't talk to you right now. I need you to go away. And he just kept following me. And he's like, please talk to me. We need to talk. Come on. And eventually I told my dad, because he had followed me down to the bathroom and was not getting out of my face when I told him I needed space. And I didn't want to talk to him. And finally he convinced me to hang up on my dad. My dad had tried calling me a few more times and I didn't answer. So he called a welfare check with the police. Before the police had showed up, my ex told me that his mom was coming over to talk to us as a neutral third party. And I said, I don't want to talk to you and I don't want to talk to your mom. I need space. And she just came over anyway. And he told his mom he didn't remember pulling the knife on me. She said that we just needed to work it out. And when I told her about the knife thing, thinking back on it, I said I didn't know if he was going to hurt me or hurt himself. And she just looked at me and she said, well, those are two very different things, which I felt like was minimizing what was said and like telling me that even if he was threatening himself, that doesn't affect me. Like what he was doing was fine, but it was a terrifying experience. And he had threatened with a knife before, and then he actually pulled one on me. I felt kind of betrayed, and I knew at this point I couldn't trust her. And I kind of started putting pieces together about the situation and the closeness of their relationship that was kind of strange, but this was kind of a slap in the face because I had hoped that she would care that her son was potentially going to hurt somebody else or himself. And really, it just felt like she dismissed it. And they kind of just ganged up on me. I had mentioned to my ex that I wanted to move home. And he said, absolutely not. The least I'll settle for is 50-50 custody. And you are not taking my son out of this state. He said that my son and him have the full backing and financial support of his parents, who are much wealthier than me or my family, and really just tried to bully me out of things. But I guess to step back just a little bit, the incident with the laptop, the cops showed up while his mom was there. And I answered the door. And they told me that they were there for a welfare check and wanted to make sure I was okay. And mind you, we have all these cameras and stuff around the house. My ex had taken me off of our camera, so I had no access to it. And I told the cop, because I was right in front of the camera, I feel okay right now. He asked me if I wanted information about domestic violence, and I said, yes, please. That would be nice. And he gave me that and his card. And they ended up leaving after talking to my ex and his mom. She ended up leaving, and I went and sat in my car. I called my parents, and they told me that I needed to go to the police. And at the time, I told the cops, I don't want him arrested. I want to do everything as civilly as possible. I'm afraid of this person. He is acting honestly kind of unhinged. I don't know what's going to happen, but it keeps escalating. And I told them that in October I'd taken him off of my life insurance because I was concerned. That was another thing. He wouldn't let me contribute to my 401k, but made me get the highest life insurance policy that my work offered, which was over $1 million, and made me put him on as 50% of the beneficiary and 25 for each of the kids. So in October, when things first happened, I took him off because I was concerned about that, but there was no violence at that point, or physical violence. So I told the cops about that. I told them about the knife. I told them about the laptop incident and what had happened. And I said I didn't want to press charges. I just wanted it on record in case things got worse. They knew where to look. And he asked me several times, are you sure you don't want to press charges? And I didn't know that in my state, if somebody comes and there are incidents of domestic violence, it's a must arrest. So he kind of softened the police report, which hurt me in court. We ended up going to court for the domestic violence. They found him guilty of 4 counts of domestic violence, but did not grant me a permanent restraining order. During the time I did have the restraining order, he was still spying on me. He still is. I don't know how, but I had a moving truck because I was trying to get some of my stuff out of our home. And both times I had a moving truck, he sent his family to come drive by and take pictures of me with the moving truck. And I called the cops both times. And because it wasn't him, they couldn't prove that the family was sent to spy on me, even though it's a different town on a dead-end street that they would have no reason to drive by. So there's been stalking. I had to switch my phone number, and I'd had that phone number for 10 years. He reopened my phone line with my old number to get texts meant for me, which he brought into court. I'm trying to think. It's been a pretty brutal process. He's tried to file contempt of court a few times over different frivolous things. He, on one hand, won't let me move home and told one court that he's happy to have me stay in the home and pay half the mortgage. So he doesn't really have to give me child support because he's paying half the mortgage. And I'm not allowed to move for that reason. But the day after we got that ruling, he filed something with another court, the Superior Court, to sue me for the house and kick me out of the house. So he's kind of like, I would consider it legal abuse, where he's playing these two courts against each other. And something good that happened actually is that judge, I think, saw that, because in the one hand, it literally quotes, "I'm happy to have her stay there." And then the day later, after we got that, he filed with the other court asking me to either have to move out so he can move in or pay him rent to live there. So a lot of that, I've had to pay tens of thousands of dollars in attorney fees. I had to take out credit cards and personal loans, which scares me. I work in finance, and so I have to make sure I'm on top of all my payments. I've had to miss a lot of work from this, and I've kind of maxed out all my credit cards through everything, and I never carried debt before. I've always been really responsible with my finances, and was getting to a point where I had saved a little bit of money and all my savings went to this. And then I've had to dig into debt and paying for a house that we could hardly afford together. Like utilities are all on me. And I am also paying all of the daycare for our son. He doesn't have to pay any of that. And he's living rent-free with his family 5 minutes away from me, monitoring me. So it's been a lot. I was diagnosed with PTSD, and I've just been trying to work through everything and focus on what I can control.
And if you had any words of wisdom for everyone listening, what would they be?
I guess words of wisdom would be to look for those red flags in the beginning. I didn't pay attention to them, or I kind of brushed some of them off. And yeah, finding out, I guess I had reached out to other girlfriends after the fact, and a lot of the things I went through, they also went through. And I think one of the bigger ones would be listening to how they talk about other people and the way that they do or don't take responsibility for their actions. Because when something is always somebody else's fault, I think that's a really huge red flag. Also, kind of looking at relationships with parents, because in this relationship, he was always seeking his mom's approval. And I think that she was always kind of more important than me, which again, I think it's important to be close with your family, but it's also important to care about or respect your partner when you're going through things. So kind of just paying attention to how they interact with other people and with their family would be the big things. And then trusting your gut when you do see those red flags, even if they're little, the little things do add up. And it's hard to, after being with somebody for 5 years, find out that it was fake. And you deserve better. Everybody deserves to be loved and treated with respect and adored. And there are so many women out there who are settling. And it doesn't matter if you have 2 kids from 2 different dads. You're still a great person and you deserve to be loved.
Well, Frances, I really want to thank you for being here with me today and sharing your story. And there's just so many different parts of your story where someone could feel validated of what they're going through. You know, you touched on so many different things, from the gaslighting, you know, to the manipulation tactics, all the manipulation tactics, to, you know, the fear. And I just really want to thank you for being here with us today and sharing your story, because you helped a lot of people. So just a, you know, big thank you.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for doing this and being a platform for so many people. And yeah, it has helped with my healing journey. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Frances, for being here once again. And if you want to be a guest like Frances was today, please do go to our website at narcissistapocalypse.com and click on the guest form button at the top of the page. There you can read all of our instructions, and please read them all and either send us an email at narcissistapocalypse@gmail.com or fill out our guest form and press the submit button. And please do send it in the format that we ask for. Also, at our website, we have a support group, so if you need support, join our support group today at narcissistapocalypse.com. Inside, you'll see that we have Zoom meetings every Wednesday night, Thursday afternoons, and Saturday nights. We have forum boards for you to post on to get the validation that you need from survivors just like you. It is a wonderful group of people on there, and you can make a lot of friends too. So if you need support, join our support group today. And if you need even more support, please do visit our friends at domesticshelters.org. At domesticshelters.org, they have articles and resources to help you make sense of everything that you're dealing with, and that includes phone numbers, email addresses, and web addresses for shelters and agencies, no matter how big or small the town you're in. Domesticshelters.org has it there. So if you need extra support, please do go to domesticshelters.org. And we have other friends of the show called Shelter Movers, everyone, and Shelter Movers can be found at sheltermovers.com. And what they do is they move all of your stuff out of your home into storage, and that can be your pets and livestock too. They are only available in Canada, and it is a donor-supported charitable organization. So if you need help from them or just want to donate to them, go to sheltermovers.com. And that is it for today's episode, for today's survivor story. So for myself and Frances, we hope you have a good night.